Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Do Not Fix Human Minds, written by Captain Candy. Warning: do not under any circumstances attempt to fix a human mind. I'm sorry for not introducing myself first, but the severity of the case warrants that. My name is Dr. Amelia. I am the head of the Central Galactic Psychiatric Hospital. As you know, we recently found yet another new race who the Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided we should uplift. Naturally, I requested this new race to send several of their mentally ill, developmentally disabled, or otherwise intellectually impaired to the facility, as well as a standard fully functional adult from the society, so that we can become more familiar with their minds. Firstly, it must be stated that the minds of the humans are complex, unbelievably so. Where most sapiens only need a few million interconnections in their minds in order to not only survive but thrive. In their native homeworld environment, humans needed far more. Orders of magnitude more, in fact. Let me give you an example. I'll use myself for it. I have about 300 million different connections within my own mind, and a few tens of billions of possible interconnections and variants. The excessive number of connections has given my race the ability of psionics. We can read minds, move the world around us with them, and peer into the psyche of other races in order to repair their mental states. That is why my race runs the Central Galactic Psychiatric Hospital and has done so for generations. This is already a large outlier example of connections in the mind of a sapient within a galactic community. As you know from the galactic standard education, no doubt, this means that most races in the galactic community have some underlying process in the brain that helps it run itself, some mechanism that allows us to feel emotions, that our empathy, sense of justice, right and wrong all come from, a device within our minds that balances the instincts programmed into us for generations with a new sense of self that comes from higher thinking, math, and reasoning. However, humans, they make our minds look like underdeveloped second-rate computers. They have, as a baseline, an affecting baseline, 100 trillion interconnections and 86 billion neurons. Why should any sane species that hasn't ascended have that many? And that's not the worst part. The human brain has more possible interconnections than there are atoms in the universe. So naturally, the humans also have multiple mechanisms to control everything. I've identified no less than 5 so far. 3 they told me of themselves, and they called the id, the ego, and the superego. They are roughly aware of these ones and told me the forthright that they exist. The other 2 they are marginally aware of, and the others they are completely oblivious to. One of these is an unconscious self. Yes, you heard that right. An unconscious self. Their minds are so complex that they have 2 sets of self within their minds. Well, because of the 5th mechanism, they actually technically have 6. The 5th mechanism is that their brains have 3 parts. Yes, 3 major parts. The left hemisphere, the right hemisphere, and the central component. The left part of their brain, as so far as the humans have figured, handles all logical and mathematical functions. The right part of their brain handles creative tasks like art and poetry. And the central part of their brain takes in information from both sides, is the truest self of the humans. In short, they have a logical self, an emotional self, and a rational self lodged right between the 2. I cannot even begin to go into how utterly insane that is. No, and don't forget that each self has a backup of itself in the unconscious, instinctual parts of the human mind. How the species just didn't manipulate reality to let themselves be space-faring gods was, for the longest time, beyond me. But this brings me to the primary point of this article. Do not, under any circumstances, repair the human mind, ever. That is not to say don't heal the disabled or treat the traumatized. What I mean is more fundamental. Because the human brains are so ridiculously complex, once you give it the right nudge, unexpected events occur. Oh, and before I go too far, I should note, remember how I stated that my race was psychic because of our 300 million interconnections? Yeah, well, there are studies and experiments from Earth, the human homeworld, showing that they affect the world around them on as small as a quantum level and as large as an atomic level. The scale is so small, humans cannot even consciously control it, let alone train it. At least, they couldn't before. Why can't they do a larger scale if their minds are so complex? I hear some of you ask. Well, that's because they would have to paradoxically focus too hard, a level of concentration their split mind didn't allow them to have. They would have to focus this energy that is so condensed and powerful and spread out that it is affecting the quantum scale particles up to a macro level. Focusing that much power to cover such a large area intentionally would fry the brain of even the previous most powerful psychic to exist in the galaxy in a picosecond. Now, to the part where I might have screwed up, and why I'm placing this warning here for all staff and even public members to see, except humans. I am bioencoding this article so only non-humans can read it. Anyway, the part where I messed up. So that first batch of humans got you, and I examined the mind of the healthy one first to get an understanding and baseline. Well, just looking at his mind, unaware of how ridiculously complex it was, knocked me out cold for 3 days. Once I woke up, I spent another day to recover before continuing and examining the human's mind again. This time, though, I did so very slowly and very carefully. Once I realized how complex that was, I knew that this would be no small task. Finally, after several months of grueling work, I managed to map out and fully understand all of the parts of the human mind. Once this was done, I repaired the other humans easily enough. All trauma, disability, and improper connections in the brain fixed in less than an hour. It was simplicity itself because the unconscious selves helped me. Yes, helped me. This should have been a glaring red alarm like a hypernova for me, but I shrugged it off and continued as normal. Then I had the brilliant idea of, hey, what would happen if I unified the human brain of the healthy human and made him whole and able to use all parts of his mind consciously and singularly? That is, after all, how the rest of the galaxy works right now, thanks to my race uplifting everyone a millennia ago. How stupid I was for doing this with a human, though. I cannot even begin to describe it. It was easy. Too easy. The unconscious self was all too happy to become a singular part of the unconscious self. Once that happened, the id, ego, and superego all cascaded into place, and the entire human's mind rewired itself so there was no difference between the left and right and center. The human was comatose for nearly a year before waking up, and upon doing so, its eyes changed. It was like a totally different person, yet exactly the same. It got up and thanked me for opening its eyes to reality, and then waved its hands and opened a damned wormhole by tearing space with a thought. I don't know where the hell it went, but I pray it didn't go to Earth to adjust every other human mind. If it didn't, then I leave this memo for all future generations to never, ever repair a human mind again. If it did go to Earth in order to awaken all other humans, though, I personally welcome our new machine-like psychic overlords. End of medical log by Dr. Amelia, final head of the Central Galactic Psychiatric Hospital. End of story. Story number 2. After attacking a small human colony, an alien species begins to understand what persistence hunting means. Written by IcyAcorn. Contact bearing 304 by 486. It's a human IFF. Grand Admiral Ishik of the Grand Viral Armada felt her circulatory organs begin to pound in her body. Another attack, the third time this marker, and the outcome would be the same. Her voice made a roar from yelling orders in the dry air of her flagship. She already knew the answer before the bridge officer at the logistics station answered. Severe damage to the third battle group, several ships destroyed. Commander Mock is reporting his battle group has been reduced to 1/4 effective strength. They've inflicted only minor damage to the attacking human forces. Ishik stared out of her flagship bridge viewport. This had gone on for over 2 months. 2 months of running. 2 months of constant assaults from out of nowhere. 2 months of casualties and dwindling fuel and resources. 2 months of regret. The Armada had found the colony inside their historic borders. They had tried to hail them, but the Grand Admiral had ordered the obliteration of the small outpost, then been on their way. It hadn't even taken that much to destroy. Just 3 kinetic rounds and poof, no more invaders. Then the Armada went on its way, as if it was inconvenient as a small itch on a dorsal appendage. The Grand Admiral hadn't even known what humans were then. But then the attacks began. The attacking ships were small and primitive by the standards of the most galactic races. They still spun to generate gravity for creator's sake, but their simple munitions were atomic warheads that bypassed shields, and their small ships were indistinguishable from cosmic debris. And every time, after each attack, came the transmission in the language Ishik had come to dread. The same phrase that made her hair strands stand on end. Eye for an eye. Their ships vanished as soon as the attacks came, but they always came back. Somehow, the humans, as they called themselves, always came back. Any destroyed or damaged ships were quickly replaced, their weapons reloaded, and their engines fueled. The humans were relentless and unyielding. They offered no terms, no mercy, no surrender. They only gave the same transmission each time they struck. Eye for an eye. The Grand Armada was now 1/10 of its former glory. They had been whittled away like meat from the bone, and still the humans came. Her fleet was in shambles, her crew was running ragged, and the Grand Admiral Ishik could feel her mind cracking from the constant stress.
Ma'am, we have multiple contacts.
Ishik turned to face the sensor tech. There, she said, no longer ashamed of the panic in her voice, in everyone's voice.
They're everywhere.
The tech's voice was shook with pure fear.
All directions, all vectors covered. We're surrounded, Grand Admiral.
Ishik broke. Her mind couldn't process the information. The amount of ships, planning, resources that it would take, she couldn't. They couldn't. As the crew cried for direction and her mind splintered into pieces, Ishik heard one last voice over the comm as the fleet fell to nuclear fire. An eye for an eye. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Vitmori, Terran on Air, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lightsjock, Dragzoon WRE, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian. Thank you.